Hello, I'm Valerie Reid, and tonight I'm going to read to you from a book I have read from once before, and it's one of my all-time favorite books. It's called All Over But the Shoutin' by Bragg. Now, by way of introduction or reintroduction, I'll read from the back. This haunting, harrowing, gloriously moving recollection of a life on the American margin is the story of Bragg, who grew up dirt poor in northeastern Alabama, seemingly destined for either the cotton mills or the penitentiary, and instead became a Pulitzer Prize winning reporter for the New York Times. And this book it's divided into chapters, and they're all standalone chapters. And the one that I have chosen to read is chapter 10, and it is titled, If You Gotta Kill Somebody, Better It Ain't Family. For 3 good years, from the time I was 10 until I turned 13, I lived in a beautiful oblivion, safe from the past, unaware of what waited for us when our childhoods ran out. As the 1960s gave way to the 1970s, Sam was 13, I was 10, and Mark was 7. And when we stood side by side with our matching cowlicks, huge ears, and varying degrees of blonde hair, we looked like steps in a staircase. Sam was exactly 1 foot taller than me, and Mark was exactly a foot shorter, with freckles. I know because our Uncle John used to measure us every Saturday night with a fold-up ruler or a tape measure, or by guessing, I disremember. We had the same $1 haircut by an absent-minded barber who was prone to cut it at an angle so that the hair slanted down over one eye, like a patch. On any given day, we only had 3 eyes between us that actually saw anything. People used to see us in the grocery store standing behind Mama and grin. "They growing like weeds, Margaret," some old woman would say at the Piggly Wiggly, and Mama would politely say that, yes, and they eat like hogs. But while we were so obviously similar, our characters, which had long since formed, were as different as people could be who had the same blood in their bodies. Sam was the solid one, the one most like Mama, the one who washed cars for a quarter, toted in wood for the heater, and slopped the hog every morning before the school bus came through. Mark would become, even at such an early age, the wildly unpredictable one, the one most like our daddy, the one with mean and gentle streaks that seemed to blur and merge. Both of them were good with their hands, could build anything with a hammer and a saw, or fix anything with a wrench. But while Sam worked steadily at a thing until it was done, Mark was always dissatisfied, restless, as if something was nibbling at him inside. Even when he was still a little child, he had a rage in him. I was not much like either of them. I couldn't hammer a nail without bending it or severely damaging myself or someone standing near. And if you had depended on me to feed the fire or the hog, we would have froze to death, huddled with our emaciated pig. I was a dreamer, and while I loved the woods and the creeks and the natural bounty of our world, I also loved to bury myself in books. After all the lights were shut out, I would cover up my head, click on the flashlight, and read as long as the batteries lasted, from You Were There books about the Alamo, the Creek Indian Wars, the Battle of New Orleans. I solved mysteries with the Hardy Boys and drifted down the Mississippi with Mark Twain. By the time I was in the 8th grade, I had read every book, except the ones for the little kids, in the tiny library at Roy Webb Junior High School. I am not bragging. I was just hungry. When I was out of books, I just found a quiet place to dream. Sam and Mark built tree houses. I sailed them to China. You wouldn't have known any of this, of course, if you had driven up into our church driveway when we were all involved in some major disagreement, which sometimes resulted in a trip to the emergency room. All it took was an angry word or some insult, however slight, and the subtle differences in our characters vanished, and you would have thought we were children of Beelzebub, unbound. Mama had hoped that the passing of time would make us more passive, more peaceful, but all it did was make us stronger so we could hit harder. Like our inherent weakness for liquor, we had brawling in our DNA. Like our father, his brothers, we fought with our fists, with rocks, with mud clods, sticks, baseball bats, and once a ham bone. Sam shot me once in the hand with a bow and arrow. I was protecting my eyes. And Mark stabbed me in the forehead with a pine splinter. I bled a quart. We shot each other with slingshots and BB guns. Once I shot my cousin Connie by mistake. A snowball fight in those rare, hard winters could kill. We packed the snow around chert rocks to give us heft and distance. We knocked each other out of trees. We held each other under the water until the last lonely bubble had trickled to the top. We choked each other to see if you really did turn blue. Once, Mark hit me in the knuckle with a rock he threw from 50 yards. We walked it off, just to see. We only quit when we made our mama cry. We worried her to death and made her chase us through the hills and fields with a hickory in her hand and the wrath of God in her eyes. But if she ever broke down and cried, it shamed us. And we behaved for a while, or until she went inside. Once, I recall, she called us into the living room to ask us for help. She didn't have many sit-down talks with us, so when she did, it was serious. She had one with me, in tears, the day I took the scissors and cut the legs out of a new pair of jeans so they would fit me, jeans she had bought for Sam by ironing clothes. She whipped me a little, half-heartedly and not very effectively, the only time she ever did, and explained that there was no money left to undo what I had done. This time she explained that she was doing all she could to feed us and clothe us so that we could live decent, and she actually apologized for not being able to spend as much time with us as she would like. But she said we were worrying her to death, and she extracted 3 promises from us before we went out to play. 1, don't kill yourself. 2, don't kill each other. And 3, try hard not to kill nobody else, but if you have to, better if it ain't family. She might as well have been talking to a telephone pole. We built go-karts and mini bikes and motorcycles out of junk. Well, actually, Sam made them, but I was always the test pilot, and wrecked them all in spectacular fashion. I burned myself so bad in one wreck from the hot muffler that I lay under the cold spray of water from the outdoor hydrant. Yankees would call it a faucet, because it was the only thing that stopped me from screaming. Life was sweet, often, and the crises were small. There was the time we all loaded into my Aunt Nita's Chevrolet Biscayne, Sam, Mark, me, Mama, my grandma, Aunt Nita, my cousin Jeffrey, and our mean-spirited little dog, Barnabas, for a trip to Pensacola, and forgot the dog somewhere south of Montgomery when we all had to go into the woods to pee. We were 20 miles down the road when somebody said, "Where's that damn dog?" And we rushed back to find Barnabas looking bewildered at the side of the road where we had left him. He never did trust us much after that and refused to get into a car at all. We were poor, but we were not dull. Mama and the kinfolks and the welfare made childhood sweet and warm. Uncle Ed even bought us a pony, a mean-spirited little midget of a horse named Buster who ultimately ran away and got hit by a transfer truck. When Sam and I made the basketball team at Roy Webb, we had new high-topped sneakers, Converse. Our aunts hauled us to the games, and after a while we stopped wondering or even caring if our mama came. The basketball games were the event of the week in the community if you discount church. Our uniforms were purple and gold, and having one meant that you were part of something important. I think one of the proudest moments in my young life was a big game my 8th grade year. I believe it was Webster's Chapel, when the coach looked down the bench and said, "I need a shooter," and motioned to me. I took the pass from way, way, way out behind the top and to one side of the key and let her fly. The ball couldn't arch very high. The damn roof was too low. But it swished so sweetly, so softly through the net that I am certain grown men in the bleachers had to wipe their eyes at the pure beauty of it. It was before the invention of the 3-point shot, so they only gave me 2, but if that shot wasn't worth 3, I'll eat a bug. I missed the next one clean, a brick, a rock, air ball. I guess the first one could have been luck. Nah. Life was rich. On Fridays in the lunchroom, we had hamburgers and chocolate ice cream. I had a new girlfriend every year from first grade on. I was a smooch 'em and leave 'em kind of boy. And one year I was crowned king of second grade or third, I cannot remember, at the Roy Webb Junior High School Halloween Carnival. My queen was Debbie Grantham, who thought I was cute and didn't care that we were on public assistance. I turned 12 in the summer of 1971. I was what I had always been, the son of a woman who did all she could do on her own and needed a little help. I had given very little thought to being poor because it was the only realm of existence I knew. The lives I read about in books or saw on the black and white TV were disconnected somehow, not real. We were never invited into the nicer houses, never shopped in nicer stores. The ritziest place I had ever been inside was the dime store on the old courthouse square. It was run by two ancient sisters. I would walk the aisles looking at the toys and worthless knickknacks and magazine rack, which I was not allowed to touch. The old woman tracked me with their eyes every step I made. At 10-minute intervals, one of the old women would ask if they could help me. No, ma'am, I would say, I'm just looking. Once at Christmas, I was looking for a present for my mama. They had some ceramic angels to hang on the wall, spray-painted gold. They broke easy, I guess. I picked one up and turned to the counter, and one of the old women met me saying, "You ain't got enough money for that." To this day, I don't know how that old woman knew how much money I had. I got a lesson in who I was at Christmas, I believe in 1971. A fraternity at Jacksonville State University threw a party for the children of poor families. They bought me a coat, a pair of shoes, a football, and a transistor radio. They held the party in their fraternity house, all the sugar cookies you could handle, and the 7-Up flowed like water. Mark and I sat together, surrounded by strangers, and I drank it all in. I was 12, but I remember everything about that night. I wasn't old enough to be ashamed about being the charity these glowing young people had gathered around like a Christmas tree, but I was beginning to realize the difference between me and them. The men, who called themselves brothers, drove up with their dates in fastback Mustangs, Camaro convertibles, and cream-colored Cougars. High school graduation presents for sure. The women were all pretty. I cannot remember a time when every single woman in sight had been so damned pretty, and they all smelled very, very nice. They wore sweaters over their shoulders, and they kept wanting to reach out and mess up my crookedy haircut. The men all had on penny loafers and blue jackets with ties, more ties than I had ever seen, and smelled strongly of high karate. It was like they had a big bottle somewheres and passed it around. I did not understand the concept of fraternity, but I knew that these were the rich folks. They were not rich folk by Manhattan standards, merely by possum trot ones. They were nice rich folks. They had to be to empty their pockets for children they didn't know, but were as alien to people like me as Eskimos and flying saucers. These were the sons and daughters of small towns around Alabama and Georgia, the offspring of real estate brokers, insurance barons, and English professors. They were members of their town's First Baptist Church, give or take a Methodist or two, and just because they had a six-pack after the JSU Fighting Gamecocks whipped Troy State's ass in football didn't mean they did not love the Lord. Their Christmas tree was the biggest one I had ever seen, even bigger than the one in church. It was piled 3 feet high with presents, and after singing Silent Night and sipping punch, they handed them out to the sons and daughters of pulpwooders and janitors and drunks, who all sat perfectly still, like my brother Mark and me, afraid to move. The jacket they gave me was gray plaid wool, and the transistor radio already had batteries in it. They were Southerners like me, yet completely different. I remember thinking that it would be very, very nice to be their kind instead. And I remember thinking that, no, that'll never happen. We were part of it that night because we were poor and because we were children. And I like to think that the frat boys and their little sisters still do that for the poor children in and around town. But you simply outgrow your invitation into that better world as your childhood races away from you. You reach the age ultimately when that barrier slams down hard. between you and them and the rest of the nice, solid, decent middle class. Perhaps it wouldn't be so bad if it was a wall of iron instead of glass. You see them every day on their side. On their side, the teacher calls their name in homeroom and they walk with their heads up to her desk to leave their lunch money and pay their own way. On your side, the teacher calls your name and you stare at the tops of your shoes waiting for her to check the box beside your name that says free, wishing she would hurry. On their side, the summer glows with bronze beauties in bathing suits at the beach. On your side, people step away from you as you wait in line at the hamburger stand because you smell like sweat and fertilizer and diesel fuel. On the other side are cars that don't tinkle with the sound of rolling beer bottles and houses that don't have a bed in the living room. But really, what really kills you on that other side are the people. The smiling, carefree people who can just as easily look over into your side and turn their faces away. Only the oxygen is richer on your side. It has to be, because your childhood burns away much, much faster.